What's good, Cubers? It's your boy Matt, and I'm back today, and we're going to talk about draft matters as an archetype and how to include it in our cube, and if we should include it in our cube, along with a little conspiracy discussion tacked on to the end, all at a viewer request. Let's get started. So, first off, I want to tell you that I'm not going to be talking about cards like these. All of these guys were printed in Conspiracy, Recruiter the Guard, Exploration, which is actually a reprint, and Dak Faden, and they're all great cube cards, but they're not really the subject of conversation today because they play like normal black-bordered Magic cards. We're also not going to be talking about Council's Judgment or Arcane Savant. By the way, Council's Judgment is an excellent card if you're not playing it in your cube. And then Arcane Savant is a really interesting blue 5-drop that a lot of people play as well. But again, we're talking about draft matters and conspiracies, so we're not going to be looking at these cards either. Instead of talking about these guys, I want to talk about some cards that could spice up your draft environment, and I want to start off with my favorite, and that's the Cogwork Librarian. I actually play the Cogwork Librarian in my Pauper cube. He's 4 mana for a colorless artifact creature construct. He's a 3/3, but we don't care about any of that. The important part is in the text box. Draft Cogwork Librarian face up. As you draft a card, you may draft an additional card from that booster pack. If you do, put the Cogwork Librarian into the booster pack. What I like about the Librarian is he really spices up the draft for the whole table. Furthermore, every player to your left is waiting for you to use the Librarian so that they can then have a turn with him as well. He's going to give you 2 picks out of a pack, so when I draft him, I try to wait until my next pack or pack 2 or pack 3 so I can get double first picks or double second picks, if that's applicable. I don't like trying to use him late in the pack and get like double 6 picks or things like that. So, Cogwork Librarian is a really interesting Draft Matters cards, and he's got 2 other buddies that you could consider playing as well, and that's the Canal Dredger and the Deal Broker. Now, the Canal Dredger says you draft it face up. Each player passes the last card from each booster pack to the player who drafted a card named Canal Dredger. Now, he's not quite as good as the Librarian because everyone isn't waiting for their turn to play with him. Instead, everyone is just passing you the 15th card out of all the booster packs. And if you draft him early, say pack 1, you are going to get 8 cards out of pack 1, 8 cards out of pack 2, and 8 cards out of pack 3. That's 24 extra cards in your draft pool. But it also means that it's the 15th pick out of each of those packs. Now, we're in cube, so there's a lot of great cards floating around even at the end of the draft. And it's possible that you could try and let a card wheel late, knowing that if it goes undrafted, it could be passed back to you. Canal Dredger adds an extra layer of strategy onto the draft for whichever player happens to draft him. Another unique Draft Matters card is the Deal Broker. You draft him face up, and immediately after the draft, you may reveal a card in your card pool. Each other player may offer you 1 card in his or her card pool in exchange. You may accept any 1 offer. So this allows tradesies at the end of the draft. I find that Deal Broker fires about 50% of the time. There are times when people do want to swap with you, and then there are other times where that card you have laying over, no one's interested in it, or no one's interested in giving you something for your deck because they're looking at your pool and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to pass him this last card and turn his deck into the king of the draft and give him all these cool synergies. You'll notice that as I've been talking about these 3 cards, I'm not talking about their casting costs or their bodies. That's because you shouldn't be playing them in your deck. They are only for the draft. They should not make the cut in your main deck. Of these 3, I think the Cogwork Librarian brings just more fun to the draft because lots of players get to play with it, and if you're only going to play 1 Draft Matters cards, you should play him. Still, there are some other Draft Matters cards we could think about. For example, Lore Seeker. Costs 2, and again, none of that matters. Reveal Lore Seeker as you draft it. After you draft Lore Seeker, you may add an additional booster pack to the draft. So you want to draft Lore Seeker, 4 picks into a pack or more, because if you first pick Lore Seeker and then you add another booster pack to the draft, you get a first pick out of that booster pack, but you don't get double first picks because you first picked Lore Seeker. Whereas if you're on pick 4 or 5 and you draft Lore Seeker, now you add a new pack to the draft and you get the first pick out of that pack. So Lore Seeker is another card that's good for the whole table because you do add another pack and the whole table gets to think about drafting it and what's in it, etc. Players do this different ways. Some players build a special pack just for Lore Seeker, and it's stacked with planeswalkers or bombs or whatever. And so whenever Lore Seeker gets drafted, they just add that pack to the draft. Other people pull 15 cards at random from the cube and make that the new pack. And then lastly, one other option I've heard of is that people just buy some booster packs. And so you're drafting along and, oh, someone opened Lore Seeker. Well, grab that pack of War of the Spark, crack it open, now it's cubable. And you're welcome to go that way as well. I don't think the booster pack balances well in strong cubes because the odds of opening something cube relevant in a random booster pack from a random set is not very high. I prefer the 15 random cards from the cube or having a special pack set aside. Still, Lore Seeker does bring draft enjoyment to the entire table. The last Draft Matters construct that I want to talk about is the Aether Searcher, and this one's casting cost actually matters, so let's look at it. He's 7 for a 6/4. You reveal him as you draft it, and then you reveal the next card you draft and note its name. When Aether Searcher enters the battlefield, you may search your hand and or library for a card with the name noted as you drafted cards named Aether Searcher. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you searched your library this way, shuffle it. So what Aether Searcher allows you to do is when you play him, you get to go through your library or your hand and then cast that card that you drafted immediately after it. Searcher is different from these other Draft Matter cards we've talked about because he has to make your deck. So he costs 7. You're gonna either have to hard cast him, cheat him into play with Reanimator, or because he's an artifact, you can actually tinker him into play as well. And then you'll get to search and cast that card. You're going to have to pay special attention to what you draft after Aether Searcher. You're probably going to want it to be a permanent card. Obviously, you're not going to draft a counter spell or maybe not even a removal spell afterwards because you could tinker him into play and have no targets. That's not completely unlikely. It's perfectly reasonable to draft a kill spell after him and try and time casting him so that you can cast him and kill something. But permanents tend to be better just because they're guaranteed to hit the field, they're guaranteed to have value. But Aether Searcher is another card that is cubable and is Draft Matters. I don't like him as much as the Lore Seeker and certainly not as much as the Cogwork Librarian because he doesn't bring fun to the whole table, just the person who drafted him. There are another brand of Draft Matter cards though that we could still consider looking at. There's one more construct, and that's the Lurking Automaton, and the later you draft him, the bigger he is. I know this card sees play in Stibbs' Pauper Cube, and it's a really fun, really interesting card there. The other kind of card that you'll see are cards like Regicide, and there's a land just like it as well, where when you draft it, the player to your right chooses a color, you choose another color, and then the player to your left chooses a third color. Regicide will then be able to destroy a creature that's any one of the 3 colors that you've chosen. So it's kind of a sideboardy, flexible removal spell. I don't like it for powered cubes just because sometimes it's going to be a dead card in your hand, and some of the better decks in power cubes are already creature light, and now you've got a situational removal spell, but it makes a solid sideboard card as well. And like I said, there's a land just like it where the land would tap for 3 colors, and you're welcome to play that as well because it'll always fix at least one of your colors. But if your drafters to your left and right are paying any attention, odds are they're not going to name a color that you're in, and it's going to turn that land into a land that lets you splash as opposed to a land that lets you fix your own colors. But let's move on and talk about conspiracies. And I want to start off with Backup Plan because this is probably the most busted of the conspiracies. Draw an additional hand of 7 cards as the game begins before taking mulligans. Shuffle all but one of your hands into the library. So Backup Plan lets you draw 14 cards, 2 different hands of 7, and then you just get to pick the best one and start the game with that hand. It's a free mulligan, but you're 14 cards deep into your deck, which is almost half your deck in cube. This card is really good, and if your cube is not heavily powered, you might consider banning this for power. Backup Plan is really good, sneaky good. It looks like it's not much, but I'm promising you, Backup Plan is a busted conspiracy. There are a couple other conspiracies that see a lot of play. We'll talk about them real quick. Double Stroke, this card is really good. Hidden Agenda, start the game with this conspiracy face down the command zone and secretly name a card. Then you turn this conspiracy face up at any time and reveal the chosen name. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell with the chosen name, you may copy it. You may choose new copies for the target. Holy cow. Just think about all the great spells in Cube that you would like to double cast. I'll double Demonic Tutor, double Swords to Plowshares, double Doomblade. Double Stroke is really, really strong, and the ability to double your spells. Not to mention, once you get to game 2 or 3, you're going to have a better idea of what spell you want to double in that particular matchup. Remember, it doesn't say double a card you draft, so you can pick any card in your deck as it's relevant to the matchup. So Double Stroke, sneaky good card. Another sneaky good card is Hymn of the Wilds. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. You can't cast instants or sorceries. I know that last line looks like a drawback, but if you are in an aggro deck, this drops your curve tremendously. Now you can cast Thalia on turn 1. Now you can cast Kari Zev on turn 1. Hymn of the Wilds is bananas. It's so good in an aggro deck. Your curve is just so cheap. Suddenly, Glorybringer is your 4-drop. Flame Tongue Kavu is your 3-drop. Hymn of the Wilds is just so good, alright? Don't sleep on Hymn of the Wilds. This is a bonkers conspiracy as well. There is a few more conspiracies I want to look at really fast. Unexpected Potential has hidden agenda, so again, you start the game with it face down, and then you name a card secretly, and then you flip it face up at any time when you name that card. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast spells with the chosen name. This is my personal favorite conspiracy because it allows decks to splash spells that they have no business playing. You're playing red aggro and your opponent's about to remove your creature, and then you flip Unexpected Potential and cast a counterspell. Then you can watch your opponent cry. Unexpected Potential just allows you to play cards outside your color at any time because you can flip it at any time, so you can wait until that situational moment and then flip Unexpected Potential and cast that spell you named at the beginning of the game that you know you drafted having no business playing, but because you got Unexpected Potential, you can just cast whatever. Suddenly, the black-green deck can cast Swords to Plowshares without problem, or some other kind of large beater like Baneslayer Angel. You know, your Gruul ramp deck can ramp into Grizzlebrand and hard cast him all of a sudden, whereas he's normally a reanimator target. Unexpected Potential is really sneaky good. I love this card. If you're going to play a conspiracy, this is actually the one I recommend. It's a lot of fun and creates for some great draft moments. I want to look at just a few more conspiracies that I think are very cubable and pretty solid. The first one is Advantageous Proclamation. Your minimum deck size is reduced by 5. This is a conspiracy that a novice drafter would think is bad because it's shrinking their deck down to 35 cards. But remember, the point is consistency, and being allowed to play a 35 card deck just means you hit your bombs more consistently and sooner. So Advantageous Proclamation is great for that builder who can build the super tight deck or build the combo deck, because now the combo deck is smaller, so you're more likely to hit your pieces. Advantageous Proclamation is a conspiracy that people sleep on, but is actually really, really strong, especially in a combo deck. The last conspiracy I want to look at is one that basically designated to aggro decks, and that is that you are the starting player. Thank you, Power Play. I get to play first. Every time, every game, win or lose. Perfect for aggro decks because their turn 1 hasty is always turned on. There aren't going to be any blockers in front of it. Goblin Guide is always going to get in for 2. It can lead to some feel bads with control decks because they're always going to be on the draw, which is a big, big bonus to aggro decks against them. Still, Power Play is a good conspiracy. It's not quite as busted as some of the others that we've mentioned, but in an aggro deck, there is no better conspiracy for them. The ability to start and always be the starting player, really, really good. Well, I know you think that I'm about to say that's going to do it, Cubers, but I do want to talk about a couple of things when you play these conspiracies. Thing number 1, especially if you have a new drafter at the table, you have to tell them that these conspiracies are in the cube. They need to be on the lookout for them. They need to have them in mind when they're building their deck. They need to know that Unexpected Potential could be laying face down in the command zone. Because conspiracies, a lot of these are so good that they'll be first, second, third pickable, and so a new cuber in your draft might never see them and then start the game, and then someone flip a conspiracy on them and then go, I didn't know that was a thing. So I think if you're playing conspiracies, you need to inform your drafters of what's going on inside your cube. The Draft Matters cards that interact with the whole table, you don't have to spoil that surprise, because when they get drafted, they get spoiled and the whole table gets to interact with them. Those are the kind of cards that I like because I think they're more fair, and I don't have to give away secrets about my cube to new drafters. Just like, hey, sit down, here's the General 411, okay, let's get started. Hey, look, it's the Cogwork Librarian, this is fun and amazing. If you're going to play Conspiracies, though, I think you do it as a package. You can put 7, 8 of them in the cube, inform your drafters, have a good time playing with them that night, and then pull them back out of the cube after you and your drafters have gotten kind of used to them or kind of bored with them. I don't like them as permanent cube fixtures, but there is one other upside to playing Conspiracies and playing Draft Matters cards, and that is that all of them are dirt cheap. See, these cards don't see play in regular decks because they're only good in Conspiracy Draft or in Draft Matters Draft. So regular players in Commander, Pauper, Modern, Legacy, etc., they don't play these cards. So they can all be obtained very, very cheap, and it's a great way to spice up your draft one night. You just, fan them out, show your players, hey, we're doing something neat and interesting tonight. We're going to do Draft Matters. We're going to do Conspiracies. Slot them into the cube and spice up your cube draft that night. Well, that's going to do it for today, Cubers. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like and subscribe button. Makes us all feel really nice here at Cube4two. Be sure to follow us on the Twitter at Cube4two. And as always, and until next time, shuffle up and keep cubing, my friends.